everybody to another episode of the Written Limit. Always live and never scripted. What's up, Tom?
Richard, how are you? Your audio is very garbled to me. I don't know if Richard's hearing the same thing, but backstage we were fine, but now your audio is garbled.
Is it okay now? Better?
Yeah, you sound good, John.
Okay, you sound good now, Richard.
All righty.
All right, cool.
Must have been something there. Okay, so we are back, and we have a great guest today. I mean, we're just going to deep dive into this. Richard Peters. What's up, Richard, from UHY?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon.
Appreciate you being here.
And our topic today, cyber attacks, which might just happen with my voice just a minute ago. You never know, right? But we're going to deep dive into this because I think this is a subject that we all probably agree on. It will never happen to us. And it could happen at any given time.
Yeah, no one thinks that they're going to be attacked. Individual, or God forbid, your firm. And Richard and I were talking before the show today, and it was, it's interesting the amount of data, personal and sensitive, that staffing firms retain on a daily basis. They've got to be such a mass target for cyber. This has and might impact staffing companies in the future.
Yeah, you bet. So, I grew up thinking I was going to be a stockbroker and make a bunch of money and degrees actually in finance. So I always think I'm a businessman, but somewhere along the way, it kind of the finance nerd in me turned into an IT nerd. So got into, may have been some pirated software along the way that got me into understanding how servers and things work, and just fell in love with it. So at some point in my career, someone kind of sat me down and said, "Hey, do you want to be, a finance person, or do you want to be an IT person?" So at the time, and thankfully still, I'm glad I kind of went the IT route. So, broad IT and networking and systems and everything kind of fell into a niche, I guess, of securing those systems. And so this was the early days, and it was completely different than it is today. But through that process, then I had the opportunity to kind of do cybersecurity for NASA, so one of the contractors out there, and that's when your eyes really open to just the amount of attacks that are out there. So that's where I really kind of cut my teeth, and surrounded by some really smart guys that just made me better. And then from that, it's been cybersecurity ever since. So as the gray indicates, I've been doing it now for 20 plus years, and I'm only 26, so this is what cyber is.
Man, you are aging gracefully, brother.
That's right.
So, took to it as a toddler.
That's right. I went in early, so. Yeah, so it's been cybersecurity ever since. Got into consulting and love that space. You can be an expert within an organization, which is cool. I mean, everything about that organization. But in the consulting field, we see lots of organizations and lots of successes and lots of different ways of approaching, cyber problems that are really smart and clever. And we learn from our clients. So it's been good. 20 plus career. Absolutely love what I do. Talk about it, as much as I can. So definitely appreciate, being on podcasts and talking cyber. So,
how often when you go out to these organizations, what percentage of it is preventative versus after the fact of a company that's already been attacked?
Yeah, well, so it used to be, probably 90% preventative and then 10%, kind of, we say when the S hits the F, those kind of moments. Lately
when the spoon hits the fork, right?
That's right.
Right. Okay. Just verifying.
Yeah. So, within the last, say, 3 years, it's really kind of gone way more on the response side, unfortunately. So, now it's maybe 60-40, 65-35. We're still, able to be a little proactive in a lot of cases, but the incident response is through the roof. And, those are challenging for us just because there's always a new attack. You're trying to, it feels James Bondish. You're trying to figure out what happened, where it came from. But those are high stress moments, for our clients or future clients. And so, being a voice of reason and having seen lots of those, it's, we've got it a little bit easier in those incidents. But as you mentioned, ransomware is a huge problem now. I'd say that's probably the number one response we're getting is all around ransomware. I mean, you mentioned, just from a staffing perspective, it's really anybody who's low hanging fruit. So it's a target rich environment. Staffing's got, I think there's some joke that says, why do bank robbers rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Where would I go to rob, identities, social security numbers and those, probably staffing firms. So
Wow.
you are a target rich environment. And it's no longer, it used to be maybe a little bit more targeted hacking. It's like, oh, I see there's this new firm called X. They're huge. They're making splashes everywhere. I'm going to go hack them and make a name for myself. Today, it's not like that. Cyber is organized. So it is organized crime, probably beyond what we've seen on TV and the old mafia shows.
So the attacks that we see and read about and those that we don't, if I'm hearing you correctly, these are thought out and calculated. It's not like some hackers sit around one day in a room and say, oh, let's try and hack into this company.
Yeah. I mean, it's all over the place, but it's well organized. So there's a particular need in their environment, or they've figured out a way that to, financially gain from some type of data. They're going to figure out how to get that data. And what's crazy about it is it's organized in that they almost outsource components of it. So they outsource pieces of it to say, okay, you guys are the ones to go find the breach, find the person, get the credentials, get a footprint in there. And then we've got another bad guy group that is the group that, okay, is given this access, and now they'll pivot around the organization, finding the data, identifying it. Maybe they're the group that encrypts it. And then there's another group that kind of does the negotiations on the ransomware side.
Holy
so
cow.
that does that. And then there's the people who move the money around. And so just consider how complex, the biggest, proper organization you can think of, and all the departments and moving parts of that. This bad guy ecosystem is exactly the same. And, it's so far in that there are bad guy organizations that offer retirement, like making so much money through this that they'll guarantee that they're setting money aside for retirement funds for, participating bad guys in their network. I mean, it's bizarre.
Wow. I had no idea it was that complex and that organized.
Yeah, very much so. So ransomware is probably our biggest incident response that we get called to all the time. Those are a bit sad in that, once the encryption has occurred, there's not a lot you can do to, fix that particular piece of data. So generally it's kind of make sure that we've got the moat around it and the castle walls up. We protect anything that's there and remaining, and make sure that the bad guys are out of that network. And then it's kind of participating with law enforcement and insurance and ransomware negotiators, which is another career these days. And, work to see if that data can be recovered and that. So tons and tons of those. So ransomware is probably the number one problem right now that we're seeing.
So Richard, real quick, what's the methods they're using? Like, I hate to say it, I've worked for 10 years at different staffing firms, and we were never taught anything like, so if I'm behind a desk and I see an email come across, I think it's legit and it's not. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah. So phishing, right, is probably the easiest way. I think if there's one, common indicator across probably all security guys too, not just bad guys, but right, it's this laziness. It's if I have to work too hard to get into your organization, I can probably just skip over you and go to the next guy because it's easier for me to get in, right? Imagine going to a hunting safari and there's just so many animals there, like, oh, that one's running too fast and I'm not that good a shot. I'm going to get this guy who's right here outside of the truck, right? I mean, there's so many fish out there that you don't have to work too hard. So, one of the first things we say is just don't be the low hanging fruit. If you can do some basic blocking and tackling and make yourself a little bit, less of a target, a little bit harder to get into, the bad guy might just move on to the next one because it's a target rich environment. It's easy to, just kind of move on to the next guy. But phishing is number one way of getting in.
What are some basic, like fundamental things, Richard, that companies should be doing to have like the bare minimum protection, like things they can educate their staff on? What are some basic things that they could and should be doing?
Yeah, so there's probably a million things you can think of, but I always kind of say the basic blocking and tackling. So one of the first things we say is two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is hugely hard for a bad guy to get past. I mean, if it's fairly easy for me to probably phish you and get a username and password from you. I can devise some scheme to send you an email to convince you that, hey, to get your next paycheck, you've got to fill out the new form or whatever it is, right? So, I mean, there's all kinds of ways we can make that, and it's just a matter of time before I get your credentials. Or if you've shared your credentials, if you use the same password across multiple services, like I use the same password for my Spotify and for my Dropbox and for my work email and something else. Well, if any one of those are compromised, the password gets out there. So it's fairly easy for me, if I were operating as a bad guy, to get the password. But if you added a second factor to it, so I have to get, my app on my phone has to give me the numbers, or I have a little fob that will have the numbers. If it's something physically that I have that the bad guy can't find or phish me for, it's significantly harder for me to compromise you. So there's lots of free tools out there to do that. I mean, just adding some of that to your mobile phone. But the products you use have to support that. And the good news is most modern pieces of software and applications, banking and that sort of thing, give you that ability to use those tools. It's just a matter of you enabling them and taking advantage of it. So that's the number one thing I would always say is enable multi-factor authentication, or sometimes called two-factor authentication, everywhere. I mean, anywhere you can get that enabled, for sure, do that.
Well, what about remote workers? I mean, this is a big concern now too. They're working from home.
Yep.
Most of the time they're not protected. How do we get that into the system?
Yeah, so same thing, right? So they can use two-factor auth for the application, the business applications that they use. So absolutely have that for the remote workers. But then you're in it's almost as kind of when we take a employee and we go to the coffee shop, right? That's always been this fear, and legitimately so, that it's in an untrusted environment. So we have this endpoint, our laptop, and it's in an environment that's untrusted. Same thing I would expect, or I say when your laptop's in a home environment, it's the same, right? We've got our kid systems, and there's video games, and there's smart TVs, and cousin Eddie's systems on there, and just right, everybody clicks on everything in the home environment. So it's an untrusted network. So what do? I mean, you got to have internet access and those sorts of things. A couple of things there. One is to always run a VPN. So the same as if you're in a coffee shop. So to connect back to the organization, to interact with data or systems, always use a VPN. That does make things a little bit harder. And then two, look into software called we call it EDR, but endpoint detection and response. So your traditional antivirus that we're all used to, we used to go by McAfee and Symantec, and all those products still exist. But if you're using them as the traditional antivirus, I mean, that's pretty well a dead technology. So we do lots of penetration testing where we get permission to hack clients, but we can walk around traditional antivirus as if it's not there. We have more trouble with this EDR type software. So endpoint detection and response. So tools like Carbon Black and CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, and I believe McAfee and Symantec have some more EDR type software. But what's interesting about those, it does all the old antivirus type stuff as well, but it's really looking at processes and how a system works, and it's looking for indicators of compromise. That's much better than a signature on like, oh, that's an attack we all know, because every attack it can be customized and made to look different, and we can get around antivirus. So VPNs, EDR type software, very, very good to have.
It's amazing. You mentioned that, you get these phishing emails, and we've all received them, and some of them look so official. It's frightening, and often you can, if you look closely, you'll find one mistake. Maybe there's a misspelling in the domain name or something that triggers you, but on the surface, they're very crafty and very clever. So shift gears a second. So obviously, professionally, firms need to be able to protect themselves, and it's alarming how much data they can get access to. So when ransomware occurs, they're basically, correct me if I'm wrong, they're taking your data and holding it for ransom. The data is their hostage, correct?
Yeah, and there's a couple different ways that plays out. So there's the, maybe you might call it a drive-by encrypt, where they get access, they see your important data, or they just see all your data. They have privileged access at this point, and they encrypt everything. And so your data is still sitting there. It's legitimately there on the servers, but it's all encrypted, and you have access to it because you don't have the key to unlock it. So that's the tried and
true. So they might not necessarily physically take it, but they might encrypt it so that you can't see it.
Right. But they've escalated now. So now we're seeing more where not only are they doing that, where they're encrypting the data, but prior to encryption, they're exfiltrating the data. So they're stealing some of the data off site, and they're using it to entice you to hurry up and pay the ransom. So now your data is ransomed, and they've taken sensitive data, and they prove that they have this data, and they say, look, if you don't pay this ransom by Friday, we're going to release this data to the world, and we're going to make it known that you've been breached. And so it's just an added pressure tactic to kind of help escalate and pay that ransom quicker. So that's the next level of bad guy now, is moving towards that.
How does a company know that if they pay the ransom, A, they're going to release the encryption, B, they're going to give the data they stole back? How are they guaranteed those securities, or are they?
Yeah, well, so we're dealing with bad guys, so they are never guaranteed. But what's interesting, so this is a business model for bad guys. So this business model only works is if the bad guys are decrypting the data. So actually every breach like that we've done, the keys were provided and the data was unlocked. So they have to do that, or else once the world hears that, oh, you don't ever get your decryption keys, no one's going to get paid again. So they almost, to make their business model work, they have to provide the service that they're given there. A couple of things on that though, right? It's like, well, if no one ever paid the ransom, the business model dies and ransomware can go away. But tell that to a hospital that we have lives at stake. Tell that to a staffing firm. It's like, this is our entire business model we've built and worked our life for, and it's all locked up. And you're telling me I can't, work with insurance to pay a ransom. I go out of business. It's easy to say, well, just stop paying the ransoms because that will kill the business model. But right, it's all those that are affected. It's like, this is their livelihood, or there's lives at stake. If it's a hospital system, you've got, industrial systems that, are dangerous. There's hazards for human life there, but there's also like Colonial Pipeline, where it's like we're moving fuel. And so it's a difficult problem. There is something to keep in mind, I guess, with the ransomware. There's a list that the U.S. government's kind of come out with called the OFAC list. So I don't even remember what it stands for. OFAC, the Office of Financial something something. Anyway, this list is known cyber criminals that are, affiliated with, I guess, more terroristic type activities. So there are cyber criminal groups that are on this OFAC list that you as an organization or your insurance carrier or legal cannot negotiate with. You can't pay that ransom because then you are a criminal because you're paying a terrorist organization. So you have that complexity in there. So, which is all that to say, the ransomware things occur. You want to engage a service provider, right? That's experienced in incident response. You want to engage your legal counsel, your external counsel, because this is a large incident that probably needs that attorney-client privilege, and you need to be able to communicate and figure out what's best for the people and the businesses. But you also want to, engage your insurance carrier fairly quickly because they have relationships with, maybe preferred negotiators on the ransomware side. They also may have preferred firms that they, prefer to work with or could pay direct. But, when those incidents occur, your incident responders, your legal, and your insurance are some of the first 3 calls you should be making.
Wow.
Wow, this would give me silver hair right now, man, thinking about this. Holy cow. I want to take a twist real quick on this. How about the mobile device? We got to talk about the cell phones. I just talked to John offline here. I have candidates sending me their social security card back in the day, their license, their bank account. How secure is that over the cell phone? And it's happening all the time. I see recruiters doing this all the time from their mobile device.
Yeah, it's tough. So how to put this politely, I guess. So
Go for it.
Two major phone types out there, right? There's Android and there's the Apple iPhone ecosystem. So just from a straight, general opinion on cybersecurity, the Apple iPhone environment is traditionally more secure than an Android. The reason being, Android's a more open platform. You can do a lot more with it. You have, right, we, the individual, have power to do anything we want with that operating system. It's kind of meant to be more open. So by being more open, it's easier to, code bad things into it. So in general, I would say, if you can stand Apple and who they are, the iPhone experience is a little more secure on average than the Android. Then you have, all these jailbreaks and people who do crazy things with their phones that further puts those phones in less secure states. There's exploits out for these devices, which are all dependent upon the version, the iOS version, all those things. So there's all these weird conditions that, may make those phones more vulnerable than another. And then there was just news the other day, and I posted this to my LinkedIn because it kind of went under the radar, but there was a company that, for the most part, has relationships with all the major carriers for SMS texting. And so, imagine billions of messages going through kind of a third party, an aggregator works with these. That company was breached, and they've been breached since like 2016. So this is like years and years of those SMS text messages that, and the facts are still coming out. We don't have the details, but other than they've announced that, yes, we had a breach. And so this has been a little bit under the radar, which to me is concerning because I can imagine the types of data that goes across the MS type message. So your social security, your, private messages, your images, your PDFs, and just those types of things, which could have been gobbled up. So it's a problem, right? The convenience is there. And so it's hard to fight people on convenience. It's like, I need this right now. Odds are good. It's probably safe to get it to you. But there's going to be those, it's those random one-off things, those third parties we don't know about, how good the hygiene is of the phone carrier that, clicks on everything or does anything. It's dangerous. So obviously, the less you can do it, the better. But if you're going to do it, the more you can purge that data off into your proper systems that you can secure and control better, all day long, go down that path.
Wow. And if you say you save the the resumes, or you save everything, all their information on your phone. Is that protected even though it's saved there, or can they tap into that too?
So it depends, right? So there's exploits that come out all the time. So every day there's exploits that are released for applications, phones, hardware, just, you name it, there's these different things. So you're kind of just, if you were fully patched today, right? I don't know of any known exploit where I could send something to you to, get all the data out of your phone. But right, what about tomorrow? There might be a new exploit. As soon as it's made known, we do proof of concept. We could totally do that. So you don't know when that pending doom is coming. But what about, the iCloud backups and all those things? So you back it up to your phone. Well, maybe I can't remotely get to your phone, but I know you connect your phone to your home PC and you do, a backup there, or maybe you do an iCloud backup, and maybe your password policies aren't so good on those platforms. So I could just download your iCloud backup. I might be able to kind of back my way around to get that data. So you always got to kind of remember where that data moves as you go through.
Tell you, there's a lot that these bad guys think about. That's for daggone sure. On an individual basis, not a corporate basis, what are some things that the average Joe, like myself, should be doing to protect their home computers?
But you're not the average Joe, John. I'm just messing with you. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, no. So I guess, the first thing probably applies to both enterprise and individual, right? Is backups. So especially in the, for ransomware, which does affect individuals too, but knowing that you have a good backup that you've tested, works, is, that will talk you off the edge pretty quick. You feel a lot better when it's like, hey, this is a huge nuisance now, but my data is safe.
Gotcha.
And so what we found though is backups may be occurring. This may be more on the enterprise, but those get encrypted data. So for both personal and enterprise, maybe tested them and make sure those backups are maybe out of band, right? They're not stored on the same network or on the same box your whatever, where your important data is, move it, put it on a hard drive that's disconnected, right? Do a backup once a week and move it off site. If you're an enterprise, you move it to cold storage up in a cloud somewhere and there's not a path there. So backups are huge. It's a good peace of mind when something bad happens, right? You can get your data back, and that is peace of mind that you can't trivialize. The second thing is, logging is important. From an enterprise perspective, it's hyper important. We see inappropriate logging all the time. Maybe that's a little less likely from a home perspective, but it's hard to know what happens with your systems without some level of logging. So, having those things turned on. But then from a I guess this would apply to both enterprise as well, but we see this more from a home or like a small business perspective. When you're running like a Windows operating system, like Windows 10, you have the ability to run your user as an administrative type user or a standard user. So everybody just kind of does admin because it's easy and convenient. I can install any software I want. I can just click the button and I can do what I need to do. Highly encourage you to just kind of run your day-to-day activities as a standard user. So maybe you have, our computer standard user. For most days, I run as a standard user because I don't need to install software every day. What that does as an administrator, you have privileges. So if I can get you to click on an email or get you to install a piece of software or send something to you, if you're a privileged user, then I can operate as your admin privilege and it's game over. If you're operating as a standard user and I can convince you to click on something, you as that standard user probably don't have permissions to install it. So my malware dies and,
so it's going to stop you before you get a chance to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So standard user is kind of how you want to operate. The same for an enterprise. I mean, we still find lots of clients that, kind of the workstations are the users are administrators of those systems. And so if we can get them to do anything we want, then we have access to that system. And then from that system, we start trying to pivot to other systems, to the servers or the data we know is living there somewhere.
Wow.
Man, a lot of information here. I tell you what, this is just the tip of the iceberg, John. I mean, we're going to have to bring Richard back. This is just the beginning of what's going on here. Quick thoughts, John, before we wrap up the show, man. What do you think of everything going on here? Wow.
It's a lot bigger and a lot more complex than I ever imagined. I had no idea it was so organized. And you're right. We need to probably bring Richard back because we're just scratching the surface. And I'm sure it's an ever-changing and very fluid environment. To what Richard mentioned earlier, staffing firm, the staffing industry is a target-rich environment. We've got a lot of sensitive data. So if we're not taking proactive measures to protect that data and secure it, then we're just asking for trouble, because it seems like these bad guys and bad guy organizations, that's what they live for, is to see how much chaos they can generate in the spirit of earning a buck. So yeah, great information today. And again, I'm sure there's so much more that folks can learn.
So true. Richard, where can everybody see you at? Where can they reach out at you and maybe have, a more in-depth conversation? Because this is something that I think every staffing firm, recruiting firm needs to learn.
Yeah, no, appreciate you guys letting me participate today. So easiest way, probably via email. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm always up for a conversation. But my email is rpeters@uhy-us.com. And if you do the Twitter thing, all of us cyber guys have to have a handle. We pretend to be cool. But my Twitter handle is @rfhacker. So kind of radio frequency. Did a lot of wireless hacking back in the day. So @rfhacker, or send me an email, and always glad to talk shop.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you again for coming on the show. I can't wait till next time, because I want to hear some stories. I want to hear some of the stories that's going on with our leverage friends in the staffing industry and how to prevent that. And I'm going to leave on this one note here. I'm going to show this picture. This is the nightmare I'm going to have tonight, Richard, because like you said, I mean, this could be happening to anybody at any given time. But I just want to let you know, hey, once again, thank you so much. We'll be in touch for another episode of this, because this is something that's going to be, in the forefront for the future. I mean, this is it's happening right now as we speak. But once again, same place, same time next week for another great episode. Richard, thank you again. And John, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank you, guys. Way to go. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.